The morning fog hung thick over the small coastal town of Millbrook as Catherine Hayes stood at her kitchen window, watching the waves crash against the rocky shore. Her hands trembled as she held the steaming cup of coffee, the familiar ritual doing little to calm her nerves. Today marked 6 months since the accident that had changed everything. Catherine, known to friends as Kate, had always been the strong one in her family. As a nurse at Millbrook General Hospital, she was used to helping others through their darkest moments. But nothing had prepared her for losing her younger sister Emma in a car accident on a rainy October night. The guilt consumed her daily. She should have driven Emma home from the party instead of letting her take her own car. Her husband William, a local lighthouse keeper, had been her anchor through the storm of grief. His gentle nature and unwavering support had kept her from completely falling apart. William understood loss in his own way. He had lost his father in a fishing accident when he was just 16. The lighthouse he now tended had been his father's responsibility before him. The phone rang, jarring Kate from her thoughts. It was her mother, Margaret, calling from the family home where Kate had grown up with Emma. Margaret's voice was strained, barely holding back tears as she spoke about the upcoming memorial service they were planning for Emma's birthday next week. The whole community wanted to be involved. Emma had been beloved by everyone who knew her. As Kate hung up the phone, she felt the familiar tightness in her chest. The panic attacks had started a month after the funeral, striking without warning and leaving her gasping for breath. William had found her collapsed in their garden last Tuesday, convinced she was having a heart attack. The doctor had explained it was anxiety and grief manifesting physically in her body. William appeared in the doorway, his weathered hands still damp from his morning shower. His blue eyes held the same sadness that had lived there for months, but they softened when he looked at his wife. He had taken leave from the lighthouse to be with her today. They had an appointment with Dr. Sarah Chan, a grief counselor who specialized in traumatic loss. The drive to the counselor's office was quiet except for the sound of rain beginning to fall on the windshield. Kate watched the familiar streets of Millbrook pass by. The bakery where Emma used to buy her favorite chocolate croissants, the bookstore where they had spent countless Saturday afternoons, the pier where Emma had learned to fish with their grandfather. Every corner held a memory, and every memory felt like a fresh wound. William reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. They had been married for 8 years, together for 12, and he could read her emotions like the weather patterns he studied for his work at the lighthouse. Dr. Chin's office was warm and welcoming, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs arranged around a small coffee table. Kate had been resistant to counseling at first, convinced that talking about Emma would only make the pain worse. But the nightmares were getting more frequent, and she had stopped sleeping in their bedroom, choosing instead to curl up on the living room couch, where she could see the lighthouse beam rotating through the night. William had his own struggles that he kept carefully hidden from Kate. The responsibility of caring for someone so broken while dealing with his own grief was taking its toll. He had started having doubts about whether he was strong enough to help her heal, whether their marriage could survive this kind of devastating loss. Some nights, he would stand at the top of the lighthouse and wonder if Kate would be better off with someone who hadn't already been damaged by loss. The session with Dr. Chun revealed layers of complexity in their grief. Kate blamed herself not just for Emma's death, but for being unable to save her marriage from the strain of mourning. William blamed himself for not being able to take away Kate's pain, for sometimes feeling frustrated with her inability to move forward. They were both drowning in guilt and sorrow, each trying to be strong for the other while secretly falling apart. As they left the counselor's office, Kate noticed how William's shoulders sagged with exhaustion. For the first time in months, she saw past her own pain and recognized that her husband was suffering too. The realization hit her like a physical blow. In her grief, she had been so focused on her own loss that she hadn't seen how much William was carrying. That evening, they sat together on their back porch overlooking the ocean. The lighthouse beam swept across the water in its eternal rotation, and, for the first time since Emma's death, they talked honestly about their fears. Kate admitted she was afraid she would never feel whole again, that the happiness they had shared for 8 years was gone forever. William confessed his fear that he wasn't enough to help her, that maybe she needed more than he could give. The conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. Instead of protecting each other from their pain, they began to share it. William told Kate about the nights he stood at the lighthouse fighting the urge to call in sick because he couldn't bear to leave her alone. Kate told William about the dreams where Emma blamed her for not preventing the accident, dreams so vivid she would wake up apologizing to empty air. As the night deepened and The lighthouse continued its faithful vigil. Kate and William made a pact. They would face this grief together, honestly and completely. They would stop trying to shield each other and start supporting each other. The memorial service for Emma would be their first step toward healing, not forgetting Emma, but learning to carry her memory without being crushed by the weight of loss. The decision felt both terrifying and liberating. For the first time in 6 months, Kate allowed herself to imagine a future where the pain might ease, where she and William might find their way back to each other and to happiness. It wouldn't be the same happiness they had known before. It would be deeper, marked by loss, but strengthened by their commitment to weather the storm together. The week leading up to Emma's memorial service brought unexpected challenges that tested Kate and William's newfound commitment to honesty. Kate had returned to work at the hospital, but her concentration was shattered. During her first shift back, she broke down while treating a young woman who reminded her of Emma. The same bright laugh, the same way of tucking her hair behind her ear when nervous. Head nurse Patricia Morrison, who had known Kate for 7 years, gently suggested she might need more time off. But Kate was determined to push forward. Work had always been her refuge, a place where she could focus on helping others instead of dwelling on her own problems. Now, even that sanctuary felt compromised by grief. William struggled with his own return to normal routines. The lighthouse required constant maintenance, and the isolation that had once brought him peace now felt oppressive. He found himself checking his phone constantly, worried about Kate being alone at the hospital. The automatic nature of his work, checking weather instruments, maintaining the beacon, recording ship movements, gave his mind too much freedom to wander into dark territories. Their evenings together became both precious and difficult. They were learning to navigate conversations about Emma without falling into the old pattern of protective silence. Kate shared memories of their childhood that she had been too afraid to voice before. How Emma used to sneak into her bed during thunderstorms. How they had planned to open a flower shop together someday. How Emma had been saving money to surprise their parents with a trip to Ireland where their grandparents had been born. William listened with a patience that amazed Kate. He had only known Emma for the 8 years of their marriage, but he understood that these stories were sacred. He contributed his own memories. Emma helping Kate bake his birthday cake last year. Emma insisting on teaching him to dance at their wedding anniversary party. Emma's terrible jokes that somehow always made everyone laugh. The memorial planning brought the entire community of Millbrook together in ways that surprised both Kate and William. Emma had worked as a teacher's aide at the local elementary school, and the children had created a memory garden with flowers and drawings. The fishermen who knew William's family offered to release lanterns from their boats during the service. Even people who had barely known Emma wanted to help, drawn by the Hayes family's reputation for kindness and community service. Kate's mother Margaret threw herself into the preparations with an intensity that worried everyone. She insisted on making all the food herself, despite offers of help from neighbors and friends. She spent hours at Emma's apartment, which had remained untouched since the accident, carefully choosing items for a memory display. The activity seemed to be her way of staying connected to Emma, but Kate could see the exhaustion taking its toll. William found himself becoming the unofficial coordinator for the practical aspects of the memorial. His calm demeanor and attention to detail made him a natural organizer, but the responsibility added another layer of stress to his already heavy emotional load. He arranged for chairs, coordinated with the pastor, managed the endless stream of people wanting to contribute something to the service. 3 days before the memorial, Kate discovered a box of letters in Emma's bedroom that changed everything. They were letters Emma had written but never sent, to their deceased father, to friends she had lost touch with, to Kate herself. The letter addressed to Kate was dated just 2 weeks before the accident, and reading it broke Kate's heart in new ways. Emma had written about feeling lost since graduating from college, about struggling to find her place in the world while watching Kate build such a successful life with William. She wrote about being grateful for Kate's strength, but sometimes feeling inadequate in comparison. Most painfully, she wrote about planning to move away from Millbrook to find herself, but being afraid to tell Kate because she didn't want to disappoint her. The letter revealed that Emma had been struggling with depression and anxiety that she had hidden from everyone. She wrote about feeling like a burden to the family, about worrying that she would never find the kind of love and stability that Kate had with William. The night of the accident, Emma had been driving home from a farewell party for herself. She had finally decided to move to Portland and start fresh. Kate called William home from the lighthouse immediately. When he found her sitting on Emma's bed clutching the letter, He thought she was having another panic attack. But this was different. This was the breakthrough that Dr. Chun had said might eventually come. Kate wasn't just mourning Emma's death anymore. She was mourning all the conversations they never had, all the support she never offered for struggles she never knew existed. William held Kate as she cried harder than she had since the funeral. But these tears felt different, cleaner somehow, like they were washing away the guilt that had been poisoning her grief. Emma's death was still a tragedy, still senseless and devastating, but it wasn't Kate's fault. Emma had been dealing with problems that no one in the family understood, problems that required professional help that she never received. They spent that night reading through all of Emma's letters together. William suggested they share some of them during the memorial service, with Margaret's permission. Emma's own words revealed a young woman who was struggling but also hopeful, who loved her family deeply but felt the need to find her own path. The letters painted a picture of someone more complex than the happy, carefree sister Kate remembered. Margaret's reaction to the letters was initially one of denial. She couldn't accept that Emma had been suffering without any of them knowing. But, as she read Emma's words, she began to understand that her youngest daughter had been protecting them from her pain the same way Kate had been trying to protect everyone from her grief. The family pattern of silent suffering finally became clear to all of them. Dr. Chun helped them process this new information during an emergency family session. She explained how common it was for depression to be hidden, especially in close families where individuals felt pressure to maintain certain roles. Emma had been the happy one, just as Kate had always been the strong one. These family dynamics, while born from love, could prevent honest communication about struggles and mental health needs. The revelation about Emma's hidden depression also brought some relief to William. He had been carrying guilt about not knowing Emma well enough, about not seeing signs of distress before the accident. Learning that even Kate and Margaret had been unaware of Emma's struggles helped him understand that some pain is carefully concealed, and that missing those signs didn't make him a failure as a brother-in-law. As the memorial service approached, the Hayes family faced it with a new understanding of Emma and of themselves. They would be honoring not just the bright, cheerful young woman everyone remembered, but also acknowledging the complex, struggling person she had been. They would celebrate her life while also recognizing the importance of mental health awareness and open communication within families. Kate felt a shift in her relationship with William as well. Seeing him handle the discovery of Emma's letters with such grace and wisdom reminded her why she had fallen in love with him. His steady presence during the crisis, his willingness to support her through every revelation and breakdown, reinforced their bond in ways that felt deeper than their original connection. The night before the memorial, Kate and William walked along the beach below their house. The lighthouse beams swept over them repeatedly, and Kate found comfort in its predictable rhythm. Tomorrow would be painful, but for the first time since Emma's death, she felt like she and William were truly facing it together. They had stopped trying to protect each other from grief and started supporting each other through it. The difference was subtle but profound. Instead of carrying their pain alone, they were learning to share the weight. The morning of Emma's memorial service dawned gray and misty, with gentle rain that seemed to echo the collective mood of Millbrook. Kate stood before her bedroom mirror, struggling to fasten the clasp of the pearl necklace Emma had given her for her 30th birthday. Her hands shook with a combination of nerves and emotion, and she found herself wishing she could simply stay home and avoid the public display of grief altogether. William appeared behind her in the mirror, his own eyes red from a sleepless night. Without a word, he gently took the necklace from her fumbling fingers and fastened it around her neck. His touch was steady and sure, anchoring her in the moment when everything else felt unstable. They had agreed to read portions of Emma's letters during the service, but Kate was having second thoughts about exposing her sister's private struggles to the entire community. The community center had been transformed by an outpouring of love that overwhelmed the Hayes family. Emma's students had created a massive collage of drawings and written messages that covered one entire wall. Local businesses had donated flowers, food, and their time to ensure everything was perfect. The memory garden created by the children featured not just flowers, but small wind chimes that created gentle music as people moved through the space. Margaret arrived early, dressed in Emma's favorite color of lavender, carrying a photo album she had stayed up all night completing. The past week had aged her visibly, but there was a new determination in her bearing. She had decided to speak publicly about Emma's hidden struggles with mental health, hoping it might help other families recognize signs they had missed. As people began arriving, Kate was struck by how many lives Emma had touched in her 26 years. Former students, now teenagers, came with their parents to pay respects. Teachers from the elementary school shared stories of Emma's creativity and patience. Neighbors who had barely known her came because they knew the Hayes family's pain and wanted to offer support. Pastor David Reynolds, who had known Emma since she was a child in Sunday school, opened the service with words about the complexity of human experience. He spoke about how people can carry both joy and sorrow simultaneously, how someone can be deeply loved while still feeling alone in their struggles. His words seemed to give the assembled community permission to remember Emma as she truly was rather than as an idealized version. When Kate stepped to the podium to read from Emma's letter, the community center fell completely silent. Her voice trembled at first, but as she read Emma's words about feeling lost and searching for purpose, she could see recognition in many faces. Emma's struggles were not unique. They were shared by many young people trying to find their place in the world. William followed Kate, reading Emma's words about gratitude for her family's love and her hopes for the future. His deep voice carried Emma's optimism along with her pain, painting a picture of someone who was struggling but not without hope. The letters revealed Emma as someone who cared deeply about others while battling her own demons, someone who deserved compassion rather than guilt from those who loved her. Margaret's speech was the most powerful moment of the entire service. She spoke with raw honesty about the family's failure to create space for Emma's struggles, about their habit of protecting each other from difficult emotions. She announced the creation of the Emma Hayes Mental Health Fund, dedicated to providing counseling services for young people in Millbrook who couldn't afford professional help. The community response to Margaret's announcement was immediate and overwhelming. People began pledging donations before the service was even over. Local business owners offered to organize fundraising events. Dr. Chen volunteered to provide training for teachers and parents on recognizing signs of depression and anxiety in young people. Emma's death was becoming a catalyst for positive change in their small community. As the formal portion of the service concluded, people moved outside for the lantern release that William had organized with the fishing community. Each person had been given a biodegradable paper lantern to write a message to Emma. The sight of hundreds of people gathered along the shoreline, each holding a glowing lantern, was breathtaking in its beauty and solemnity. Kate found herself standing between William and her mother as the lanterns rose into the misty sky. For the first time since Emma's death, she felt a sense of peace rather than crushing grief. The community's response had shown her that Emma's life had mattered, that her struggles were shared by others, and that her death could serve a purpose in helping prevent future tragedies. The boats offshore began releasing their own lanterns, creating points of light on the dark water that mirrored the lights rising into the sky. It was a visual representation of the connection between earth and heaven, between the living and the dead, between individual grief and community support. Kate felt Emma's presence not as a source of pain, but as a warm memory that would always be part of her. As the last lantern disappeared into the clouds, people began sharing their own stories of loss and struggle. The memorial service had opened a door for honest conversation about mental health in their small community. Young people spoke about their own battles with anxiety and depression. Parents admitted to missing signs of distress in their children. The evening became an impromptu support group that lasted until well past midnight. William watched Kate throughout these conversations, amazed by her strength and grace. She listened to each person's story with the same compassion she brought to her nursing work, offering comfort and understanding without judgment. He realized that their shared grief had not broken her. It had revealed depths of empathy and resilience he had never seen before. During the cleanup after everyone had gone home, Kate and William worked side by side in comfortable silence. The overwhelming response to the memorial had shifted something fundamental in Kate's understanding of Emma's death. Instead of seeing it as a senseless tragedy that destroyed their family's happiness, she was beginning to see it as part of a larger story about community, mental health awareness, and the importance of honest communication about struggling. Margaret stayed behind to help with cleanup, and for the first time in months, the three of them were able to talk about Emma without the conversation being dominated by guilt and regret. They shared favorite memories, laughed at Emma's quirky habits, and made plans for continuing her memory through the mental health fund. Emma was still gone, but she was no longer a source of pure pain. She was becoming a source of motivation for positive change. As they drove home that night, Kate reached for William's hand and told him she was ready to move back into their bedroom. The couch had become a symbol of her separation from normal life, and sleeping apart from William had only added to both of their feelings of isolation. She wanted to rebuild their intimacy and partnership, starting with the simple act of sharing a bed again. William felt a lightness in his chest that he hadn't experienced since before the accident. Kate's gesture represented more than just a change in sleeping arrangements. It was a sign that she was ready to reconnect with their life together. The memorial service had shown them that grief could be transformed into purpose, that loss could strengthen rather than destroy relationships when faced with honesty and community support. That night, lying in their own bed for the first time in months, Kate and William talked about the future in ways they hadn't been able to since Emma's death. They discussed expanding the mental health fund, perhaps creating annual memorial events that would keep Emma's memory alive while helping others. They talked about their own healing process and their gratitude for the community that had supported them through their darkest time. The memorial service marked the end of the acute phase of their grief and the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship. They had learned to share their pain instead of hiding it, to seek help instead of suffering in silence, and to find meaning in loss instead of only seeing tragedy. Emma's death would always be a source of sadness, but it no longer defined their entire existence. 3 months after Emma's memorial service, Kate and William found themselves navigating a new kind of challenge. The intense grief that had consumed their lives was gradually giving way to something more complex. The slow work of rebuilding their relationship and rediscovering who they were as a couple after profound loss. The process was neither linear nor predictable, bringing both moments of unexpected joy and periods of setback that tested their commitment to healing together. Kate had returned to full-time work at the hospital, but her approach to nursing had fundamentally changed. She found herself drawn to patients dealing with mental health crises, and her own experience with grief made her more effective at providing emotional support. The head of psychiatry, Dr. Michael Torres, had noticed Kate's exceptional ability to connect with struggling patients and offered her the opportunity to train as a psychiatric nurse practitioner. The opportunity excited Kate, but it also brought anxiety. Pursuing additional education would mean more time away from William and less energy for their relationship recovery. They spent long evenings discussing whether this was the right time for such a major life change. William encouraged her to pursue the opportunity, recognizing that helping others with mental health struggles could be a way for Kate to honor Emma's memory while building a meaningful career. William was facing his own professional crossroads. The lighthouse keeper position, while steady and familiar, no longer satisfied him the way it once had. The isolation that had once brought him peace now felt limiting, especially after experiencing the power of community support during their grief journey. He had been offered a position with the Coast Guard's Marine Safety Division, which would involve more travel and interaction with people, but would also require them to relocate from Millbrook. Their conversations about the future revealed how much their priorities had shifted since Emma's death. Before the accident, they had been content with their quiet life in Millbrook, focused on their individual careers and simple pleasures. Now they both felt a pull toward work that had greater meaning and impact. The challenge was finding a way to pursue their individual growth while maintaining the closeness they had fought so hard to rebuild. Margaret had become deeply involved in the Emma Hayes Mental Health Fund, which had grown beyond anyone's expectations. The initial goal of providing counseling services for local young people had expanded into a broader mental health awareness program that included teacher training, parent workshops, and peer support groups. Margaret's passion for the cause had given her a new sense of purpose, but Kate worried about her mother throwing herself into the work as a way of avoiding her own grief. The first major test of Kate and William's new communication patterns came when Kate began having nightmares again. Unlike the guilt-driven dreams that had plagued her immediately after Emma's death, these new nightmares were about losing William. In the dreams, he would disappear without warning, leaving her alone in ways that felt even more devastating than Emma's death. She would wake up in panic, reaching for him to confirm he was still there. Rather than hiding these dreams as she might have done before, Kate told William about them immediately. They discussed the dreams with Dr. Chun, who explained that it was common for people who had experienced sudden loss to develop fears about losing other important people. The nightmares were Kate's psyche processing the reality that love always comes with the risk of loss, but that the risk was worth taking. William struggled with his own version of these fears. He found himself becoming hyper-vigilant about Kate's safety, checking in with her frequently during his work shifts, and worrying excessively when she was late coming home. The irony wasn't lost on him. Having learned to support Kate through her grief, he was now developing his own anxiety patterns that needed attention. They instituted new rituals to help manage these fears. Kate would text William when she arrived safely at work and when she left for home. William would call Kate during his lunch break at the lighthouse. These check-ins weren't about control or mistrust, but about providing reassurance that helped both of them function better during their separate work hours. The Emma Hayes Mental Health Fund organized its first major fundraising event 6 months after the memorial service. Kate and William found themselves at the center of community attention in ways that felt both honoring and overwhelming. Local media wanted to interview them about their grief journey and the positive changes that had emerged from tragedy. While they appreciated the opportunity to raise awareness about mental health, they also struggled with being seen as inspiration rather than simply as people who had survived loss. During the fundraising gala, Kate was approached by a young woman named Sarah who had been one of Emma's former students. Sarah, now 19, told Kate that attending the memorial service had given her the courage to seek help for her own depression and anxiety. She had been planning to drop out of college and had been having thoughts of suicide, but hearing Emma's letters read aloud had made her realize she wasn't alone in her struggles. Sarah's story had a profound impact on Kate. For the first time, she could see concrete evidence that Emma's death was leading to saved lives and positive change. The guilt that had dominated her grief began to transform into something more productive, a sense of responsibility to continue the mental health advocacy work that had emerged from their family's tragedy. William witnessed Kate's transformation during the gala and felt his own sense of purpose clarifying. Watching her comfort Sarah and speak passionately about mental health awareness, he realized that their individual career changes could serve a shared mission. Whether Kate became a psychiatric nurse and he joined the Coast Guard, or they found other paths, they could both work toward preventing the kind of hidden suffering that had led to Emma's death. The success of the fundraising event also brought new challenges for their relationship. Kate was increasingly in demand as a speaker about grief and mental health, while William preferred to support the cause from behind the scenes. They had to learn how to balance Kate's growing public role with William's need for privacy, and how to share the emotional labor of being community representatives for mental health advocacy. One evening in early spring, as they walked along the beach that had become their place for difficult conversations, Kate told William about a dream she'd had the night before. Unlike the nightmares about losing him, this dream had been peaceful. She had seen Emma sitting in a garden, looking healthy and happy, surrounded by all the people whose lives had been touched by the Mental Health Fund. Emma had smiled at Kate and said simply, "Thank you for listening." William understood that Kate's dream represented a shift in how she was processing Emma's death. The overwhelming guilt was being replaced by a sense of purpose and connection. Emma was no longer just a source of loss, but had become an inspiration for service to others struggling with mental health challenges. As spring turned towards summer, Kate and William made their decisions about the future. Kate would pursue the psychiatric nursing program while continuing to work part-time at the hospital. William would apply for the Coast Guard position, but would request to remain stationed near Millbrook so he could continue supporting the Mental Health Fund's maritime safety programs. They were choosing growth and challenge while maintaining their commitment to each other and to Emma's legacy. Their relationship had emerged from the crucible of grief, fundamentally changed, but stronger. They had learned that love doesn't protect people from loss, but that sharing both joy and sorrow deepens intimacy in ways that surface happiness never could. They understood now that healing doesn't mean returning to who they were before tragedy struck, but becoming new versions of themselves that can hold both sadness and hope simultaneously. The anniversary of Emma's death was approaching, and instead of dreading it, Kate and William were planning a celebration of life that would focus on the positive changes that had emerged from their loss. They wanted to honor Emma's memory not through continued mourning, but through continued action on behalf of others struggling with mental health challenges. Their grief had been transformed from a force of destruction into a source of purpose and connection. 1 year after Emma's death, Kate stood at the same kitchen window where she had struggled with her morning coffee in those dark early days of grief. But now, as she watched the sunrise paint the ocean in shades of gold and pink, her hands were steady and her heart was calm. William appeared beside her, already dressed in his new Coast Guard uniform, and wrapped his arms around her waist. Today would mark both the anniversary of their greatest loss and the celebration of how far they had come in transforming that loss into something meaningful. The past 6 months had brought remarkable changes to their lives and their community. Kate had excelled in her psychiatric nursing program, finding that her personal experience with mental health struggles gave her unique insight into patient care. Her professors were impressed by her natural ability to connect with people in crisis, and she had been offered a position at the regional psychiatric hospital upon graduation. The work was demanding, but it filled her with a sense of purpose that her previous nursing role had never provided. William's transition to the Coast Guard had been equally fulfilling. His new position involved coordinating mental health support services for maritime workers and their families, combining his knowledge of the fishing and shipping industries with the advocacy skills he had developed through the Emma Hayes Mental Health Fund. He found deep satisfaction in helping isolated lighthouse keepers, fishing crews, and merchant sailors access mental health resources that had never been available before. Their relationship had continued to evolve as they learned to balance their individual growth with their commitment to each other. The crisis management skills they had developed during their grief journey now served them well as they navigated the normal stresses of career changes and increased responsibility. They had learned to approach challenges as a team rather than trying to protect each other from difficulties. Margaret had become the full-time director of the Emma Hayes Mental Health Fund, which now served communities throughout the coastal region. Under her leadership, the organization had developed innovative programs that combined mental health education with community building. Margaret's own healing had progressed through her work helping other families recognize and address mental health struggles before they reached crisis levels. The memorial garden created by Emma's students had grown into a permanent installation at Millbrook Elementary School, complete with benches where children could sit when they needed quiet moments. Teachers reported that the garden had become an important tool for helping students express difficult emotions and ask for help when they were struggling. Several other schools in the region had requested similar installations. As the anniversary date approached, Kate and William received a letter that changed their understanding of Emma's impact even more profoundly. It was from a young man named David who had been struggling with suicidal thoughts the night of Emma's memorial service. He had attended the lantern ceremony and heard the speeches about mental health awareness. Inspired by the community's response to Emma's death, he had sought help instead of acting on his thoughts. David's letter explained that he had now been in therapy for nearly a year and was training to become a peer counselor for other young people with mental health challenges. He wanted Kate and William to know that Emma's death had directly saved his life, not through her dying, but through the way her family and community had responded to her death. He would be attending the anniversary celebration to thank them in person. The anniversary event itself was designed as a celebration of life and mental health rather than a traditional memorial service. The community center was decorated with artwork created by people who had been helped by the Mental Health Fund's programs. Local musicians performed songs about hope and resilience. Mental health professionals provided information booths and offered free screening services. Kate spoke to the assembled crowd about the journey from devastating grief to purposeful action. She talked about learning to live with loss without being consumed by it, about finding meaning in tragedy without minimizing the pain it caused. Her speech was personal and honest, acknowledging the ongoing nature of grief while celebrating the positive changes that had emerged from their family's darkest time. William's contribution to the program was more practical but equally moving. He presented a comprehensive plan for expanding mental health services to maritime communities throughout New England, funded by a federal grant that had been awarded based on the success of their local programs. Emma's death would now lead to mental health support for thousands of workers in isolated coastal communities. The highlight of the evening was the unveiling of a permanent memorial to Emma at the community center. Instead of a traditional monument focused on remembrance, the memorial was an interactive installation that provided information about mental health resources and invited visitors to leave messages of support for others who might be struggling. The design transformed grief into action, sorrow into service. As the formal program concluded, David approached Kate and William to introduce himself. The young man was articulate and confident, showing no signs of the desperation that had nearly led him to suicide a year earlier. His gratitude was overwhelming. But what moved Kate most was his commitment to using his experience to help others. Emma's death had created a ripple effect of healing and service that continued to expand. Later that evening, as the last guests were leaving, Kate and William found themselves alone in the memorial garden behind the community center. The space was lit by solar lanterns that had been installed as part of the permanent memorial, creating a peaceful atmosphere for reflection. They sat together on the bench that had been dedicated to Emma, holding hands and processing the incredible day they had just experienced. Kate reflected on how different this anniversary felt from what she had expected a year ago. Instead of a day of overwhelming sadness, it had been a celebration of resilience and community support. Emma's death would always be tragic, but the response to her death had created something beautiful and life-affirming. The pain of loss had been transformed into the strength to help others avoid similar tragedies. William marveled at Kate's transformation from the broken woman who had been unable to sleep in their own bed to the confident advocate who had spoken so powerfully that evening. Her journey through grief had revealed strengths and capabilities that neither of them had known existed. Their marriage had not just survived the crisis of Emma's death. It had been forged into something stronger and more purposeful. As they prepared to leave the garden, Kate noticed that someone had left a fresh bouquet of flowers by Emma's memorial plaque. There was no note, just yellow daisies, Emma's favorite flowers, left by someone who remembered. The anonymous gesture reminded them that Emma's impact extended beyond their family, and their organized programs to touch people in ways they might never fully know. Driving home through the familiar streets of Millbrook, Kate and William talked about their plans for the future. Kate would graduate from her nursing program in 6 months and begin her new career helping patients with mental health challenges. William was being considered for promotion to regional coordinator for maritime mental health services. They were discussing the possibility of starting a family, something that had felt impossible during the acute phase of their grief. Their house, which had once felt empty and haunted by Emma's absence, now felt warm and filled with possibility. The lighthouse beam that had once seemed like a lonely sentinel now felt like a welcoming beacon, guiding them home to a life rebuilt on the foundation of shared purpose and deeper understanding. That night, for the first time since Emma's death, Kate dreamed of her sister without pain or guilt. In the dream, Emma was healthy and radiant, surrounded by all the people whose lives had been touched by the mental health programs created in her memory. Emma smiled at Kate and said, "You did it. You turned our family's worst day into something that saves lives." Kate woke feeling not sadness, but profound gratitude for the journey that had brought them to this point. The transformation was complete, but ongoing. Kate and William had learned that grief is not something to be overcome, but something to be integrated into a life of greater depth and purpose. Emma would always be gone, but her impact would continue to grow through every life saved, every person helped, every family that learned to communicate openly about mental health struggles. As they began their second year without Emma, Kate and William faced the future with confidence and hope. Their love had been tested by the ultimate challenge and had emerged stronger. Their community had rallied around them in ways that restored their faith in human goodness. Emma's death had created a legacy of mental health awareness and support that would outlast their own lives. The grief that had once threatened to destroy them had instead become the foundation for a more meaningful existence. They had learned to carry sorrow and joy simultaneously, to find purpose in pain, and to build something beautiful from the ruins of tragedy. Their story was no longer defined by loss, but by resilience, love, and the power of community to transform even the deepest grief into lasting hope.